the folks that are in these incarcerated groups of crews, that's voluntary.
That's actually right. It's a voluntary program. You're eligible, but you have to choose to go to fire camps. The misconception around, folks are forced, that's false. I remember being on CNN and Victor Blackwell, he asked me, he's like, do you think this is exploitative, And I'm like, look, Victor, this is a voluntary program, right? Folks know what they're getting themselves into when it comes to knowing that it's something that they choose. It is definitely one of the best programs that CDCR has, and I recommend that to any folks that's incarcerated, to be able to give them opportunity to do something different and being able to, spread their little wings and try to be an asset to the community.
Welcome to The Last Mile Radio. I am your host, Tara Trask. Today, I am sitting down with Chief Royal Ramey. He is the co-founder and chief executive officer of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. And we'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to talk first about the LA fires. 4 months later, it's pretty clear that the fires were largely a function of a few things. First of all, almost the entire state of California was in drought-like conditions. We'd had an extremely wet winter the year before, and there had been a tremendous amount of vegetation growth that had then dried out. This is all due to climate change, by the way. We also had Santa Ana winds that are running longer periods of time during the winter. And so when you have a huge wind event where you basically have hurricane force winds of 100 miles an hour and drought conditions, it was just a tinderbox. I'm not saying that there were not things that went wrong, but generally, most of the devastation was caused by drought conditions, horrible Santa Ana winds, and those were the two primary problems. The Eaton fire was the fire that was in Altadena. The Palisades fire was the one in the Pacific Set Palisades. Those both started in early January, around the 7th or 8th, and they were not fully contained until January 31st. So these were huge fires. There were 17,000 homes, businesses, and other structures that were burned to the ground during this time period. The fires were fought by municipal fire departments and the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, which is CAL FIRE. I do remember seeing that there was a lot of commentary about incarcerated people. There was a lot of commentary that I was seeing, at least, about how unfair it is. We can't be possibly, forcing people in prison to work on these fire crews, and that is slavery, and that's indentured servitude, et cetera, et cetera. I think when you look at that, it's yep, that sounds terrible. I don't think we should be forcing people who are under state control to fight fires that they don't want to fight. That's a real perspective. I would largely agree with that. But like almost every issue that we have out there, and certainly the ones we hope to talk about on this show, and certainly the ones we hope to talk about on this show, there's a little bit more nuance to it and a little bit more complexity, because the world is not quite as simple as folks want to make it all the time. Incarcerated folks have to apply to be part of this program. Nobody is involuntarily assigned to work in a fire camp. That is according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Our guest today is going to shed a little bit more light on this too, because he was part of CAL FIRE and he worked in these camps when he was incarcerated. So there's no disciplinary, according to the CDCR, incarcerated people do not face disciplinary action if they choose not to serve their time in a fire camp. There are incentives for serving time in a fire camp. There are some points, there are some things that will add up to potentially less time. Not everybody is eligible to work in the fire camps. Folks have to be deemed physically and mentally fit. They must have 8 years or less on their sentence, and they cannot have convictions like arson or sexual violence. So, generally speaking, and my understanding is that most of the folks who are in fire camp, they've applied, they wanted to do it, and they've gone in there. According to the CDCR, program participants also receive time credits. Most firefighters can receive 2-for-1 credits, meaning that they receive 2 additional days off their sentence for every day that they serve on a fire crew, while supporting staff receive 1-for-1 credits. The pay rates were doubled in 2023. Fire crew members now earn between $5.80 and $10.24 per day, with an additional $1 being during emergencies by CAL FIRE. Now, that is a horrible wage. I think we can all agree with that. I think it becomes very complicated. I can tell you that there are folks who have gone through this program who have been pleased to have that opportunity and viewed it as a positive for them. It's more money than a lot of other jobs. Inside, I don't say that because I think it's a good thing necessarily. I mean, this is how it is. And I do think that there's a lot to talk about here, because it's easy to say that these folks should be paid better. I agree with that. I also recognize that this is taxpayer money, and I recognize that these are incarcerated individuals who have chosen to do this. And I think for many of them, and I'm not sure this is true for all, but I would say for many of them, view this as something that's positive for them to be moving forward in a positive direction. That's why I was particularly interested to talk to Chief Royal Ramey. He is the co-founder and chief executive officer of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. He founded FFRP to help individuals who are formerly incarcerated and have worked in these fire camps to overcome the barriers that prevent them from entering the professional field of firefighting. Because this is a thing, right? A lot of these guys, they work in fire camp, they gain a lot of skills. You're going to hear from Chief Ramey about this was a whole new thing for him. He had never spent time outside and hiking, and it was physically challenging for him and also really exciting. So for him, he's going to tell you he learned a lot of new skills, and there were things that he really was looking forward to being able to translate into him being able to go into firefighting when he was paroled. Now, this is where one of these, competing interests, if you will, or cross motivations or cross incentives come in to a lot of the things I think we're going to talk about on this show. Something that Chief Ramey says, if someone is good enough to fight fires in prison, they're good enough to do it when they come home. And that, to me, hits the nail right on the head. So now, with that, here's my conversation with Chief Royal Ramey of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. Welcome to Last Mile Radio. I'm Tara Trask, your host. Today I have with us Chief Royal Ramey. He is the co-founder and chief executive of the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program. I think you normally refer to it as FFRP, if I'm not mistaken. The FFRP is designed to help individuals who are formerly incarcerated and have worked in the fire camps to overcome the barriers that prevent them from entering professional field of firefighting. I just want to jump straight into it, though. These fires we've had in Los Angeles, impacted pretty much everybody in Los Angeles. I was right on the edge of one of the evacuation zones. I live over here in Hollywood. And so, the Palisades fire started. I had a friend flying in. I was going up to my property in Riverside County the following day. My daughter had already evacuated from Westwood because she's at UCLA. So her roommate, and their cat had been with me for one night already. I went to the airport to pick up my friend, who basically said he flew over the Palisades fire, which was traumatic for him, even just seeing it out the window, and basically sort of crash landed in Burbank. As I was driving to the airport to pick him up, I saw the smoke from the Altadena fire. And, at the time, though, I was still sort of naysaying. I'm like, it'll be fine. Picked up my friend, went to my place. Now I've got my friend, my daughter, her roommate, the cat, and the Sunset Fire starts. And I'm right at Hollywood and Vine. We go up on the roof. That was one of the most terrifying things I had ever seen. And we booked it out of town east that day. I think everybody in Los Angeles was impacted, at least in some way, through those fires. We were very fortunate. Obviously, nothing very, we didn't lose anything like so many people did. But those fires in particular, and the devastation that they caused, and a lot of the various allegations, probably some of them valid, some of them not, about the mismanagement and all those kinds of things. And there was also a lot of conversation that came out of that whole thing about incarcerated folks, and particularly incarcerated firefighters. And so I just kind of want to let you run a little bit, because I understand, even from just briefly conversing with you before we got on the mic here, that you're in the thick of it. You are in the thick of it. So first of all, I think tell us a little bit about the program. Tell us where you're at right now. Like I don't want us to, we'll come back through kind of how you got there, but I think it's really important that this is just such a timely topic.
Yeah, so right now we have a career training program that we offer to folks that's been incarcerated in California conservation camps, also folks from marginalized communities, to be able to be firefighters or in the forestry sector. And we have a location in Pasadena, also in San Bernardino, and in the Bay Area. So we train about 100 people a year. We get a paid stipend, and they get NWCG certifications to be able to get an entry-level position with the Forest Service, and some certifications so they can be able to work with CAL FIRE.
And let's just back up, just for folks who are coming to this conversation with absolutely no knowledge. Tell us what the California Conservation Camps are. That's been around for a long time. Yeah,
so it's been around since the 1940s, actually. And, thousands and thousands of folks have been through that program. They pretty much focus on fire suppression, but while they're not fighting fires, they're actually doing field mitigation work throughout their communities. Whatever it is, right now it's 35 camps. One point when I was in prison, it was 43 camps, and I was actually at Bautista Conservation Camp in Hemet, California. So spent 20 months there of my time, and I enjoyed it. Definitely enjoyed it. At first, it was like it was tough. Hiking those hills. I traded my boots for Nikes. Right, I'm an urban city kid from the San Fernando Valley, and going in the mountains, being in a remote area like that was kind of like challenging, but I grew to love it, fell in love with it, wanted to pursue it as a career, but it wasn't a pathway. So at that time, when I think about 2013, 2014, incarcerated firefighters were like the third of the workforce when it comes to wildland firefighting, and saves the state millions and millions of dollars each year, and they get paid, $1 an hour when out there fighting fires, and it's definitely a career that they can possibly transition once they come home, but it was never a true pathway, right? A lot of folks that I know that came before me felt like prison and public service don't mix, because it was always said that you can't be a firefighter with a felony, right? And that misconception has deteriorated a lot of folks away from trying to pursue it as a career. And that's what like drew me to want to do it and figure it out. And me and my co-founder Brandon Smith, we met in camp and was like, man, I love this, man. I enjoy this work, and I want to pursue it, but it's definitely not a true pathway. So we vowed that once we figured it out, we would come back to camp and to let everybody know that it is doable and it's possible. And last but not least, though, when I actually started to when I worked for the Forest Service and worked for Cal Fire, I found out there was a lot of folks that was incarcerated in fire camp that actually worked for Cal Fire that was just kept that under the rug, and not really, wanted to talk about it because of the stigma, of you being incarcerated and what that could, potentially do to your career. Just knowing that, you're a person that's incarcerated, you can kind of get, picked on a little bit,
Sure. Yeah, there's a quote that I found of yours where you said, if someone is good enough to fight fires in prison, they're good enough to do it when they come home. And I think that goes right to the heart of the issue, right? If you've gained the skills and the knowledge and the capacity to do it while you're incarcerated, you should at least have the opportunity to prove that you have those skills and capacity when you're out. So I thought that, and clearly that was in support of some recent legislation. You want to talk a little bit about that legislation?
Yeah, so I'm working on AB 1380, and it's pretty much helps folks that's incarcerated to be able to get some type of certifications once they in prison, and they can take those certifications when they come home and being able to, apply to certain jobs in the forestry and fire sector. And I actually testified at the Natural Resource Committee on Monday, and I think it went well. I know we're going to be talking to the California Professional Firefighters, local 2881 union for Cal Fire. And there's certain things in the bill that I think we can, negotiate and be able to strike out. But we could definitely, negotiate and figure it out. Because we know that it's very important for folks to come home with some type of certifications that acknowledge their hard work and effort, and being able to make it a little bit more easier once they come home. So shout out to Cal Fire. Honestly, they've been doing a real good job as far as talking to me and supporting my organization and what we're trying to accomplish and do. A lot, shout out to a lot of the overhead, a lot of my colleagues. I still fight fires and stuff, so we see each other on incidents and stuff like that. And folks are really trying to push it forward, but it's definitely some opposition a little bit on certain things, right? And but it's good. It's all in trying to figure things out, and we all know that everybody that comes out of fire camp don't want to become a firefighter, right? Because it's the ability to get better food. You live in a dormitory setting. When you get visits, you use a park setting. It's some amenities when you go actually to camp. And you're raising a good point. Like, just kind of backing up a little bit, how did you, or how does any person who's incarcerated in the California system find their way into fire camp? What is that process like? And then what's the experience like once you're in? So, California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation has a point system. So they got 4 levels. Level 4 is the highest level. Level 3 is like right under there, and then level 2 is where you need to be eligible to be able to even go to camp. So they have a point system. It's based off your crime, your age, gang affiliation, all those type of things, and they kind of stack up the points and figure out where you're placed. But once you get to a level 2, and then you don't have certain crimes, right? Sex crimes, you don't, arson, not P-coded in some way or whatever. You got, medical is cleared. So you have to have all those different things to be able to be eligible. And then once you eligible, then you either go to Sierra Conservation Center, go through the, training, the physical training, and also the classroom training they have for the S-190. And then from there you pass all those, and then you get shipped off to a camp. And then you start your experience there. And for me, when I went to Bautista Conservation Camp, it was definitely a challenge, because a lot of folks don't really know, right, what wildland firefighting is. Like, I didn't. I remember as a kid, because I'm from the Valley, so I remember like seeing on the news like a couple wildfires, but I didn't really register, right, to me. And then like going to camp or just talking to people in prison, they talk about all the good things about fire camp, all the good things, but they don't actually tell you that it's hard work, right?
And tell me tell the listeners, what are the good things about fire camp that you hear, through the grapevine when you first arrive at an institution? Better
food. You're in a dormitory setting. It's like, Camp Snoopy, they call it, right? You're not locked up in a cell. You actually got weights there, because on the yards, like prison yards, you don't have weights, so you have weights in camp. You have big screen TVs, depending on the camp or whatever. There's all these different, activities that you can do, and it feel like you just in the community. You're not locked up, right? And you get the better pay, right? You get $1 an hour, and then the biggest thing that a lot of folks get is like time off of their sentence too, right? So it's all those different type of things that folks go to camp for, but they don't tell you that you're gonna be trading them Nikes for some boots, right?
Right.
And they're gonna give you this pack that you're gonna have to carry. They're gonna give you this tool. And you're going to fight fire. You're going to be right there. Because CAL FIRE is considered a type 1 crew, hand crew. So when you're out there, you're on the front line. You're not, just chilling in the back. Like, you actually up there, hotlining, really getting after it. So, and it's really, drilling. And then when you're not fighting fires, you out there doing, community projects, or you're doing field mitigation work. And that's tough too. It's hard work, right?
So is it safe for a listener to assume that it's a desirable position, it's a desirable place to be in the system, but that doesn't mean it's easy?
Right.
That's what I'm hearing you say.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's physically demanding for sure.
I heard you say, I read in preparing for this conversation that the entire thing was an emotional and physical roller coaster for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it was tough in the beginning, because I just, the physical thing was kind of, it was tough, right? Just hiking with boots and had a pack, and I'm a small guy. I'm not a big guy, right? So I'm like, this feel like half my body, hiking and stuff, and then just like physically just demanding, waking up a certain time in the morning. It's like routine. You kind of disciplined on going out in the grade, and you working, and then just the emotions of like, man, why am I doing this? This is not even something that like. This is like kind of like boot camp, kind of. Yeah. I felt like it was boot at first.
That's what it sounds like.
Right, yeah. But then as time went on, it grew on me, and I remember vividly. I was like one of my first hikes, and we was hiking this hill. It's by the orange groves, actually. I don't know if you remember like that area right there, kind of off of Florida. It's like a little spot right there, and we was hiking, and I was the last guy, like. And I finally got up to the hill, and my captain was like, Royal, like, he was like, Ramey, he was like, you the youngest guy on the crew, and you the slowest, right? And I'm like, my mind was like, man, like calling me, challenging me in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And I really, my first reaction in my mind just comes from the streets is like, I want to fight, right? So, but then I'm just like, what? Let me check my emotion. Actually, let's take this this opportunity to grow, and being able to, he challenging me. So let me not challenge him in the physical, the fighting stuff, but let me actually, have my, challenge myself, mentally, and hold myself to a standard where I can actually, take this on, and every day since then, I just was like, let me get better. And eventually, probably like a couple months, 3 or 4 months later, I was actually the guy that was carrying the saw, and
which I assume is a position of. Is that a position of prestige? Is that a position of? I mean, if you're carrying the saw, what does that mean?
You I don't know if I can cuss on here, but you're a badass, right?
Yeah.
Like you're a badass, and is dope, and
Yeah.
you take pride in just being the first one to lead a fire. And once you could be physically fit there, it's definitely just knowing that you was the person that's leading, and you taking the brunt of the work, and it's you carry the chainsaw everywhere you go. So
there's esteem in that. There's real self-esteem that you can build in an environment like that. Is what I'm hearing you say.
Right.
What would you say to incarcerated folks who are listening to this, who have been thinking to themselves like, wow, I wonder if I'm getting transferred to a level 2 facility, or I might have an opportunity to be part of these camps, but that sounds kind of tough. I don't know. Like, what would you say to somebody right now who's inside, who's thinking about that?
Fire camp changed my life. It provided me an opportunity for me to be challenged mentally, physically, emotionally, and it gave me the ability to practice and exercise some of my skills, to being able to have the emotional intelligence, to prove to myself that I can do something that I think that probably be hard, or the average person would run away from fires. And I think it's a great opportunity for folks to think about how they can kind of like get back into society, right? Because when you out there, doing community projects, you out there doing field mitigation, and you fighting fires, like you feel you're not locked up. You actually contributing to society. And even though, it might be physically challenging, but at the same time, I think you could, it could definitely be a benefit to you. And if you embrace the suck and embrace that, like you can really, you could do anything. If you could fight fire, you could do anything, that I feel. So I highly recommend it, and it'll be a dope experience.
I love that. I think it's so important to encourage folks, particularly if they don't have, and it sounded like you didn't necessarily have that paradigm that can come from athletics or a background that prepares you for trying to do new things that you don't know how to do, and the discomfort that comes from that. But it is working through that discomfort, whether it's emotional, intellectual, physical, whatever it is. When you work through those discomforts and the pain, and you get to the other side and become even like moderately proficient at something that's new and was hard, there's just nothing like that feeling of accomplishment, I think. Is that fair to say about I just think that must have been a really profound experience. So hard. And it's almost like the harder things are, the more rewarding it is when you get on the other side of it.
Absolutely. And to your question earlier about the mental and emotional roller coaster, I was on a journey of trying to find myself. And one of the things that I realized was that I had, anger issues, right? I had some things that I was dealing with that I wanted to change. And I knew that if I can be able to, take on a challenge like that, then it could be able to help me grow and elevate. Because I know like this experience would help me, overcome anything that once I came home. Like I fought fire. I can come home and do anything, right? And those are the things for me that it was really important to put me in that position to be able to grow mentally, emotionally, and physically, so spiritually as well. And it gave me that opportunity to be one with nature too a little bit, and embrace things that I never have, or seen or felt or been around. And it's crazy because when you're in prison, segregation is real, right? But when in camp, like I might have a white Caucasian male next to me, or a Hispanic guy next to me, or Asian, and it's like all that prison politics aside, like we got to fight together. I depend on you just like you depend on me. And it really, puts you in a position where you're actually going to be back in real society and life. So that's something too that, kind of help me, kind of like, grow. And, I lived in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood, and I had some mild bias because I used to get bullied I used to get in fights and stuff in that area, and I had a perception of folks. But when I went to camp and stuff, it was like a different feel and a different love for everybody, and because when you in those situations where you in environments where gang infested, and you at that culture, right, you kind of get stumped in it. But then But once you realize like the bigger picture about what you actually supposed to be doing in life, and because I believe the purpose of life is to serve in whatever passion and way that you should. So it just really elevated me in so many different ways, and it showed me so many different just helped me out mentally and helped me grow. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And what I'm hearing that I find interesting is that, and you said it first when you were talking about it being like boot camp. Mm-hmm. And I've heard a few things that you've said. There is a military type component to this because, if you have any affiliation with the military or you know anybody who's military, and you learn very quickly that their jobs are all about the guy next to them. They're all about making sure that the guy next to him stays safe. It doesn't matter what color that guy is. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what neighborhood that guy comes from. Mm-hmm. But when you didn't grow up or didn't have that paradigm, why would you start with that paradigm? You learned it because the reason the guy next to you matters is because you are in a treacherous situation. And the best way to keep everybody safe in a situation like that is to all be looking out for each other. And it sounds like that's what you got partially from that experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we are going to take a break. I am Tara Trask, your host of The Last Mile Radio, and we'll be right back with Chief Royal Ramey. And we're back on The Last Mile Radio. I'm your host, Tara Trask. I'm here with Chief Royal Ramey, and we are continuing this conversation. For folks who don't have a clearer picture, and I don't, we were chatting a little bit before. I do have property up in the San Jacinto Mountains, and during that big wind event that caused all these horrible fires in Los Angeles, we had horrific wind up there. My place is up at like 5,400 feet. Mm-hmm. And because it had been so dry for so long, it was just absolutely terrifying to be out there. I have video of the wind just howling and how dry it was. And the thought that kept occurring to me is, God help us if we had any kind of spark out here. Like, it's just going to all go up like a tinderbox. It was really scary. So I just sort of have a recent experience and understanding with wildfires in particular and the fear of them. We had no electricity up there that whole week. We were working off of the solar because Cal Edison had turned it off. And I said, fine with me. We don't have electricity. We also don't have fire, which was great. Right. I was happy about that. But, in terms of the fires that were happening around Los Angeles, I was a little bit removed from them. I think it's helpful for folks to understand, like, what are the firefighters that are on the front lines? What are they facing? What kind of dangers? What kind of things are you concerned about? What kind of injuries or even fatalities happen out there? Can you paint a little bit of a picture of that for us?
Yeah, all of the above. It's definitely dangerous. There's been definitely some deaths that happened or occurred, fatalities. People get injured. But it's in the front lines, you're actually, doing a lot of the things that, with a hotshot crew or, a Type 2 crew with the U.S. Forest Service would be doing. So.
And just for folks who don't know, what, like what?
Oh, so just cutting fire line near fire, right? Assisting with back burning operations, right? In the thick of it, like in real treacherous terrain, that, if one wrong move or one step, it could be over, But we have, competent folks from CAL FIRE that's captains that's out there and, that have experience and stuff. And it's a great opportunity because the things that you're doing in fire camp on a wildland hand crew, you'd be doing if you was on a profession, like on a hotshot crew, and some limitations. Depending on the crew, the captain's capabilities and skills and stuff. It's definitely definitely dangerous. Yeah.
So, and it seems to me like you kind of know all the pieces of that because you've traveled the full road from, working as a wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service and also for CAL FIRE and then also for FFRP's own Buffalo Hand Crew. Tell me what the Buffalo Hand Crew is.
Yeah, so the Buffalo Hand Crew, we pay homage to the Buffalo soldiers that they fought fire in fire in 1910 in Avery, Idaho, and they actually saved the town. And if you can imagine around that time, you see a bunch of black folks with guns and stuff in a town in Idaho, right? Helping saving the town, is actually legit. So that's where the Buffalo hand crew kind of, we pay homage to those folks, and it's just it's a type 2 crew. We got a couple of folks right now. We was trying to get off to the ground and stuff, but due to funding and stuff, we kind of utilize our folks to go out and do our career training program and help teach classes and stuff for our folks that's joining our program. And yeah, we go out, we do fire prevention work, field mitigation work throughout the state. We do prescribed burning with the Nature Conservancy. We brush clearing, weed abatement stuff, wood chip and things like that. And then also just go out and fight fire too throughout the nation. We go out and fight fire. Normally in the summertime, we have a contract with a contractor out in Oregon that they subcontract us out and stuff and give us the opportunity to go out. But been in definitely a lot of talks with different local fire departments to see if they can be able to sponsor it and being able to give folks opportunity that come out of our program. So fingers crossed. We're trying to get that off the ground, but it's been definitely a challenge. We started the Buffalo Hand Crew in 2022. So
I love that, and I think it's more necessary now than ever because we have so much history of marginalized folks, Black people, Native folks, women being erased in the country right now. And I think about how furious I was when I learned how many Black soldiers fought for the Union in the Civil War. I didn't learn that in my textbooks in school in Texas.
Right.
Okay, I didn't learn that. I learned that like 3 years ago or something, watching a documentary. Wow. And when you learn that kind of stuff and it was withheld from you, it's infuriating. So I think the idea of drawing attention to the historical underpinnings of some of the things that you are doing now in this day is really important. So I really applaud y'all doing that. I think that's helpful. I know from reading about your story that when you were at CAL FIRE and then obviously you were paroled at some point and your decision was, I have these skills, I want to become a professional firefighter. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that was not an easy path by any stretch. It's not like you were able to come out and say, hey, I've got these skills that I learned with CAL FIRE and I'm just going to go on now with any fire department. Oh, they're going to love to have me. That's not quite how it went, I take it.
Yeah, it was definitely a challenge. And I remember Brandon coming home first, and he was like, bro, I applied to the U.S. Forest Service. They denied me. And I'm like, what? He was like, yeah, I got through all the process, but they denied me because of my record. And I was like, dang, that's crazy. And he was like, man, I don't know. It was like, it might be ugly. So I was like, wait until I come home. We're going to see. And end up coming home, trying to figure out, talk to folks, and went to a couple of little fire, houses and try to talk to people. They was like, yeah, bro, no. Like, absolutely not.
Did they give you any reason at the time?
Felony.
They just said you have a record.
Yeah, they don't know nothing. They didn't give me no information. So I was like, okay. So, months went by. One of my best friends, he ended up talking to a guy at his church and was like, I think he might can help you. And so we ended up sitting down with him maybe like a week later. And he actually worked for the U.S. Forest Service. He was on the Big Bear Hotshot crew. And, I sat down with him. I said, look, before you start talking, like, I got a felony. I was in camp. I love this. I want this as bad as I want to breathe. I do whatever I need to do to make it happen. Is this something doable? And he said, absolutely. He's like, I know multiple people that are like, that's on the crew right now probably have, that actually have records. And
so what's interesting about that is a lot of the people in these firehouses and in these fire departments that you were speaking to, they had worked with folks who were in camp. They must have, right? Is that a fair assessment on my part or no?
Yeah, it depends. It depends. Okay. And that's the thing, is just, it's a touchy subject, and a lot of people have their own ideologies and things of how they feel about incarcerated, firefighters, sure. Right? Which I won't get into too much detail because I know folks would be like, please don't say that, right? But it's just the nature of the beast, when growing up, so from what I heard when I talked to my colleagues, right, when they grew up, it was really competitive getting to the fire service, right? And it was all about, holding information because, if you tell somebody else that they can give an edge over you. So there was a lot of competition. And as time went on, they had pockets of time where it'd be, a flood of folks that wanted to work for, say LA City or LA Fire or whatever, or LA County Fire. And you would have 10,000 applicants for only a certain amount of jobs, right? So it's really been like that competitive, mentality.
Sure.
That has been carried over generation or decade over decade. So it's like, we want people that we feel that's the best person for the job. And so majority of those folks, they feel like, is the people that actually go to, get the EMT, go to get their fire academy, right? And don't get in trouble. They don't have a record, right? And, a good citizen, right? Or, which, I kind of push back on that. Is like, you have a lot of firefighters that, make poor choices once they, get hired on and get fired and do things that's not cool and they don't have a record, right?
Right.
And then you have some folks like myself that, was incarcerated, in fire camp, wanted to pursue it as a career, came home, figured it out, right, and doing stellar in the department and haven't gotten in trouble since, right? So it's like it's a trade-off with that.
Right.
It depends on the individual. Obviously, depends on what it is. But like, to be honest with you and transparent, it's just, if a person that's in camp want to pursue it, regardless of their background, regardless of their, gender, regardless of whatever, they should have an opportunity.
Right.
Because a lot of folks know that, just to be transparent and real, like, everybody has made a mistake in their life in some way, shape, or form. Some folks haven't probably even got caught. And I know a lot of my colleagues say the same thing. Like, I was, one person away or one, moment away, or like I got a break from this, the police officer, and I could have, changed the trajectory of my life. And that moment for them, that's where they now, obviously pay it forward and understand that, folks like myself that have a background can do it at the high level and can be one of the better, firefighters out there, so.
Right. And so if we're going to judge people on merit, if we're going to judge people on capability, like, let's actually do it, right? Let's not do some kind of weird, oh no, you've been incarcerated. Sure, you paid your debt to society, so to speak, but we're still going to keep that as a mark against you, which seems on its face unfair. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I can put myself in the shoes of somebody who comes from a 5th generation family of firefighters who says, well, I just want to make sure they don't edge me out. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but I can also kind of understand where it comes from. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But it's like, that person might actually be the same person who's yelling and screaming about DEI, right, as being a problem. So it's like, how about we just let everybody get a shot at it? Right. That seems to me like what would be the thing that's most fair, and also not institutionalizing, historical discrimination that's not helpful to anybody. Because what we really want out there is the best firefighters we can get. Exactly.
And let me just to add on to that, like, I'm a real believer in the best person for the job. Right. And a lot of folks that's incarcerated in fire camp are the best people for the job. Right. And let's see who shakes out, we in help, so my organization has transitioned over 275 people in jobs in forestry fire careers, and including 50 of those folks have worked for Cal Fire. So and doing amazing, doing stellar work all throughout the state. So if we want to keep that same energy, keep that same energy, when it comes to the best person for the job, because there's a lot of folks and you got women out there just killing it, outdoing some of the men and deserve a shot and leadership and, being able to really get there, get more women involved into the fire service. And that's the thing that I really think that is important for us to be able to try to, to continue to open up those pathways and really just let's have the rule. The rules should be the rules, right? The rules is best person for the job. And let's make that happen. It shouldn't be a matter around what their background is. If a person's truly serious about it, they're going to show you. Think about it. A lot of folks that apply to these jobs, they're doing it for a reason. They actually want to do it, right? If folks that don't want to be a firefighter, they won't apply. So give a person at least an opportunity to prove themselves that if they they really want to do it, they'll show it. They'll show up and show out.
And this is a theme that we know well here at the Last Mile. I know for a fact that a lot of the employers who have hired, graduates of the Last Mile programs say that those folks are their best employees. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. It's what you're talking about. You take a person who was incarcerated, who did a lot of things inside to better themselves. Absolutely. And to try to seek out programs so that they could have a better chance on the outside, and then pursued further on the outside. Those are generally speaking, I think it's safe to say those are pretty unique individuals, people who are trying so hard to better themselves. And it's not surprising at all to me that we're hearing from you. We hear from employers that employ Last Mile graduates the exact same thing. Like, these are some of the best folks you can ever hope to have at your company, on your crew. And again, that's got to be judged on a case-by-case basis. But I do think a lot of what we're trying to do here, and I know you're trying to do with 275 people you've placed, is to lift that stigma that follows formerly incarcerated people unfairly.
Exactly. And you'd be surprised. And for me, it was like I had that chip on my shoulder, right? Knowing that, this is an opportunity for me to be able to take care of my family and being able to show, that we can, transition and change. And, that right there just in itself is a motivating factor for me to continue to, make the same decision each and every morning of I'm going to show up and be the best person I can be and be an asset to my folks around me and my community. And that's where we know, we make a mistake like that, we can potentially lose it all again. And that's where I think that having that kind of hanging over your head a little bit kind of helps, stay focused and want to do, go above and beyond on certain things and having gratitude of the opportunity, right? And just being able to know, because when folks go through things in life, you cherish the basic things in life and the simple things in life, right? And the opportunity to come home. I got a friend, his name is Sam Lewis. He's the executive director for ARC, and he did 25 years in prison and leading this multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization, and he's just grateful. You could just see it, he's contributing to society and doing great work, right? And that's the thing that is, for me personally, is just motivating too, and knowing that we have to pay it forward and we can show folks that we can actually not only just be a firefighter, but we also can be executive directors of organizations. We can be able to lead. One of my good buddies too, Ken Oliver. You got folks like Larry Miller, that's president of the Jordan brand. We have these backgrounds, but we also, can be in all these different spaces, not just in certain aspects of folks is warehouse jobs and having, in fast food restaurants, and hospitality and all that. No, we can actually be leaders in spaces, and I think that's really transformative to, for all of the community, that folks that have ever been incarcerated and all throughout the country. And
it's important for folks that are still inside to be able to see those success stories and understand that there is potentially another path. And we can talk some more about that. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. I'm Tara Trask, your host on The Last Mile Radio. Welcome back to The Last Mile Radio. I am your host, Tara Trask. I'm here with Chief Royal Ramey. One of the biggest issues surrounding both, I know for sure, at least incarcerated wildland firefighters, is the topic of compensation. Mm-hmm. And that was in the news. A lot of people were talking about that. Incarcerated firefighters earn between $5.80, and I mean $5.84 or $5.80 and $10.24 per day. That's according to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. And I know for a lot of folks on the outside, that sounds downright horrifying, and kind of is, but I do think that there's potentially some context. I would be very curious as to how you would speak to the concerns around numbers like that.
Yeah, everybody knows that earning $1 an hour is ridiculous, right? That's just, I say that's common sense, right? I'm like, would anybody want to work for $1 an hour doing anything, right? But we also know that, when it comes to the state budget, right, and like the money that actually it saves, the state so much money, right? It's a complicated conversation, and I have talked to, both sides, like at least the folks that's, that opposes it, and have valid concerns, right? But I think it got to come to a medium, and the $19 an hour. I think they have a bill called AB 247 that I believe Isaac Bryan has authored. I know a lot of folks is like, that's a lot of money. Folks earning that money. Half that money is gonna go to restitution. It's are they having financial literacy? Like, when they get this money, when they come home, what are they gonna do with it? Like, or if they don't have a true pathway when they come home, like, what does that look like? Because I know it's multiple different levels of success when they come home from fire camp, right? Like, you need certifications, you need a reliable transportation, you need stable housing, you need you need a direction, your plan, you need the pathway, right? If you really truly want to do that, or pursue it as a career. And that's where those things, right? Like, all those conversations on how complicated it could be. But I definitely know that $1 an hour is ridiculous. 1950, that's something that, I just honestly, like, just knowing how money situation with the budget, I know that might not be a thing, but I think folks could come to a medium with that to at least compensate folks more. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited about the opportunity, because now we're actually talking about it, because that's the thing I think is exciting, and being able to provide folks opportunity. But for me personally, like, our focus and goal is to help folks transition when they come home. And if they have a little more money in their pocket for that reliable transportation, stable housing, being able to make those that smooth transition, and that is always going to be a great thing, right?
Right.
And actually paying for restitution is a good thing too, so.
Because it's hard work, and it should be compensated as such. I can certainly speak for a bunch of my white lib friends who just look at that and think immediately that it looks like indentured servitude, mm-hmm. and certainly that's a concern. Mm-hmm. At the same time, that's a lot more than a lot of people get paid in prison, but it's also a much bigger benefit to the community than likely some of the other jobs you can have when you're incarcerated. Mm-hmm. So it's one of these things that, like, I just think we have a more full conversation about it, and get, instead of just ideological conversations, which I just find repeatedly so often they're far off the mark. People think they know what they're talking about, and they actually don't. It's more complicated oftentimes. Mm-hmm. CAL FIRE and incarcerated firefighters can, not always, but can provide benefits to those folks down the road, hopefully. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But obviously, the discussion around compensation is something that needs to happen as well, because it strikes me that the incarcerated firefighters in California are doing a real service, mm-hmm. and should be compensated as such. Mm-hmm. It sounds like that's a bigger conversation. One thing I'm also curious about is, how are the dynamics just between, and I'm sure there's a variation on this as well, the crews that, when you're with CAL FIRE or you're in the camps, the guys that are out there that are not incarcerated, how are those interactions? How well are the incarcerated folks received on those crews? It sounds like there is a lot of intermingling. Is that, and I guess also I would ask is, have you seen those relations improve over time, or does it remain, I would assume can be challenging, and if so, does it remain that way, or things that are getting better? I'm just kind of curious about that.
So I'm very confident in saying that a lot of the local government agencies, federal agencies across the board respect folks that are incarcerated firefighters. They know that they do a great work. It's just the transition from, fire camp to them wanting to pursue it as a career and what that looked like, right? Like, and that's where I think the big challenge is. You know, they love and rave about, you know, the good work they do, but do you really embrace us when we come home and we want to pursue it as a career?
Because all of a sudden you're a competitor. I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about with like people just having the opportunity, right? And it's like when you're allowing more people to compete for certain roles, that makes the people who were entitled to those roles or felt that they were, it can make that more challenging for them, which feels like a loss sometimes, even though that's not the right way to think about it, at least in my view. The other thing I think it's important for the listeners to know is that the folks that are in these incarcerated groups of crews, that's voluntary, right? You're not being assigned to go out and fight fires against your will as an incarcerated person. Is that fair? Is that right?
That's actually right. It's a voluntary program, so you're eligible, but you have to select. You know, you have to choose to go to fire camp. So that's something too that, you know, the misconception around, you know, folks are forced. That's false. But that's why, you know, I remember being on CNN and Victor Blackwell, he asked me, he was like, do you think this is exploitative, you know? And I'm like, look, Victor, like, this is a voluntary program, right? Yeah. Folks know what they're getting themselves into when it comes to, like, knowing that it's something that they choose, right? And then when you actually not really understanding, though, like, what you actually going to be doing, that's a whole different ballgame. But yeah, it's definitely one of the best programs that, you know, CDCR has and stuff. And, you know, like I said, I'll recommend that to any folks that's incarcerated, to be able to give them opportunity to, you know, do something different and being able to, you know, stretch their little wings and try to be a asset to the community, you know. Yeah.
I mean, I pick juries. I'm a trial consultant, and, you know, so when I get a prospective juror and I'm looking at their profile and they're a firefighter, right? Like, firefighters have a really unique position in most communities, different than law enforcement in a lot of ways. Firefighters are almost universally highly regarded in communities. And I just think that is a really neat bridge to be able to take formerly incarcerated folks and move them into a line of work, for lack of a better way to say it, is probably more of a calling for a lot of them, that is so highly regarded. Like, that is a cool thing to be able to help people achieve if they want to achieve it, because I'm certain that is not an easy road. I know it wasn't an easy road for you. I think you were 10 years or something getting out to really getting to really where, I mean, I don't know, maybe you should describe it instead of me describing it, but it took a while.
Yeah, it did. But just getting to this point where, you know, once I decided that this is what I wanted to do, it took a toll, especially when you I didn't know the pathway, right? And just trying to figure out, like, what are the actual steps to be able to become a firefighter. And, you know, when I had to, so crazy thing, right? So when I first started to work for CAL FIRE, I remember getting selected and I got a call, and it was like, this is, CAL FIRE from Siskiyou unit, right? You know, do you accept a job, right? And I'm like, absolutely, right? And then I hung up and I'm like, oh, snap. Where's Siskiyou County, right? And I go and I look at it, I Google, I'm like, oh my God, like, I'm all the way up there, like, Cause I remember, you know, going up to doing the my basic training and stuff up there, but like I just was like, I forgot, and I'm like, cause this was like a couple years later, and I looked, I'm like, man, this is at the end, like this is the last county in California. So I used to live in Redlands at the time. I was working with the Forest Service, and it was a 12-hour commute. So CAL FIRE has a 3-day on, 4-day off shift, right? So, you know, I had to, you know, drive up 12 hours. Work my 3 days, and then drive back home, and then I only had 2 days off, technically, and then going there, and I did that for about like 4 months until I actually got enough money to be able to fly to Sacramento and stuff to cut down the commute. But, you know, it was grueling. You know, it was times where, you know, I had to really question, like, man, is this something that I really want to do? But The following year, I ended up going to Riverside, and it was a great transition. But just the determination and the no's and the roadblocks, or like, you don't have this certification, or you can't do this, or being able to switch up, like code switch. Definitely got to code switch real quick. It's all those different intricate things that is important too. And to tell you the truth, like, one of the biggest challenges for me was, I grew up in a city. I never hanged around white Caucasian males before. So, and this is a white Caucasian, dominant field. And I had to learn how to have that conversations and being able to vibe and have an open mind, knowing that I knew that I was going to be able to, show that not only folks that come from the inner city are, like, in their terms, ghetto, or, folks that don't fit in, right, because of where they come from. And it just was an honor for me to know how to navigate that. So now I can be able to teach our folks that come through our program how to, navigate certain conversations, conflict resolution stuff. Folks might say things that, it could be offensive, but, you got to think about the next person that's coming behind you that might look like you, that might get that same treatment, and you got to understand how to navigate. And
right.
It's a paramilitary culture, right. And you got to learn how to, like, move. And that's where I think we have so much success in the fire service, because we know what it is, right? And we just trying to be able to provide those folks the opportunity and be an asset to the community. So that's our mission.
It's loud and clear to me. You said a minute ago that regardless of any legislation, you're going to keep putting your guys, the people who are going through the FFRP program, you're going to keep getting those folks placed with the Forest Service, fire departments. Mm-hmm. But there is active legislation. Mm-hmm. I think anytime anybody has to interact with the California legislature is probably a little bit exasperating. And so, not asking you to talk out of school or anything, but you came in kind of shaking your head, and I know you're in the thick of those negotiations right now. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that, and more importantly, tell us how we can help.
So the first thing I realized that, you got, a couple of sides, right? You got one side that wants to be progressive. Another side is more conservative. And I'm actually a Obama leader. I had the opportunity to go through a leadership program, and it really taught me how to negotiate and being able to understand the other, side of the aisle, right? And being able to come to common ground. And, it's about understanding what you're trying to achieve. So we have a saying in the fire service, it's called leader's intent. And it's to task, the purpose, and the end state. So, like, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? Like, so what's the task? What are we trying to, do? What are we going to do? What legislation are we trying to pass? What's the purpose, right? Because that's one of the biggest things. And then what does this look like in the end? So what do everybody want, right? How are we going to make this bill pass that's going to be able to really provide opportunities for folks, or, to be able to put us in a position where, everybody's happy. And it's just funny because it's, I feel like it's a lack of knowledge and understanding, right? And people don't bring subject matter experts in these, these beginning talks, where it really can kind of like get to a place where it's like no talking, and it's just like, I'm oppose it, or this is what we want, and then nothing gets passed. And the biggest thing, though, the support, I think, is for folks to go out and learn about stuff like propositions, like voting, right? Talking to your assembly members, your senators in your district, right? And really advocating and being more involved in understanding what are some of the bills that want to be passed, right? And being proactive and learning about it, and trying to read the bill, and whenever you feel like something is like aligned with your beliefs, go up to SAC and advocate for it, or go to your local districts and talk about the bill. And if you got subject matter expertise in that area, it's important for you to really, voice your opinion. And then that's where, you have, I consider myself a subject matter expert in incarcerated firefighters, right? And
absolutely,
yeah, bring me to the table. Like, I can help alleviate a lot of the back and forth, and I think that's a lot of the bureaucracy, right? And I understand certain, plays around it, but if we want to get things done, we really got to come to the table with folks that really know what they're talking about, and give them the platform to help educate both sides so things can really can move forward, because that's where I think things can get a little choppy. So
yeah, and what happens, I think, is that people get ideological when they should just, they'd be so much better if they're willing to come to the table. To your point, I think anytime you're arguing out legislation, I mean litigation, anytime there's a settlement, I mean, everybody being happy is probably not likely to happen. You got to go in kind of recognizing that, like, you want to try to get the best possible outcome for your side as you can, and you have to recognize that you're going to have to give, the other side's going to have to give.
Absolutely.
But if you can drive those conversations with data and facts and information, like you're talking about, it can make a big difference. One thing I neglected to mention, now's a perfectly fine time, you know, recidivism rates generally in California about 50%. For formerly incarcerated firefighters, it's like 10%, right? That's a huge, huge benefit that comes from these programs. Like that right there, the amount of taxpayer money that's being saved, you know, just to be very straight up to people who be listening to this who are like, I don't care about any of that, but I do care about my taxes. Yeah, guess what? These programs save the state of California and you, the California taxpayer, money.
Absolutely. And to your point, it costs about $138,860 to house one person in California prison, right? And that's a ridiculous number. Like, we all paying that. Like, I'm a taxpayer, right? You getting a piece of that. And when you hear that number, like, if you can be able to, for example, you know, a quarter of that, right, and put them through a program, once they come home through our organization, we can be able to help them transition, and then they can be able to make $60 to $100K a year with benefits, retirement, and they're contributing to society. And that's when you look at that social return on investment that I think folks don't get sometimes. And that's where that data you're saying and the storytelling around how this really changed your life, and you tying those two things in. And I got to shout out to Sam Lewis. That's my guy. We was talking about that. He kind of gamed me up on that. And I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense when you're talking about raising dollars for the organization and you really trying to show the true impact, because that's what I do it for. I do it for the impact. Like, I know I had this run of media, you know, coverage of my organization, what we're doing, but I'm really about, you know, impact. And I sacrificed my career for Cal Fire to go and do this organization. And I really believe in what I'm doing, and it's saving lives, it's saving communities. And, you know, we in the intersection between workforce development, criminal justice reform, and the climate crisis. We hitting all three points. And it's like, it's really been rewarding to me knowing that, you know, I was previously incarcerated, now, you know, running this organization, or have, you know, did firefighter professionally, running this organization now, and really paying it forward to give others an opportunity at the same type of, you know, passion and love that they you know, fell in love with when they was in fire camp. And I feel like not only just they're affecting not only just their immediate family, but their communities too. Like, you got to think about it, like, everything you do affects everybody around you, right? And like, think about when they transition, it's just amazing and what that folks can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I so appreciate you joining us. Everybody can find Chief Royal Ramey on the internet. Pretty easy to find him. I did. You can find the Forestry and Fire Recruitment Program also online. Any place else you want to direct folks to either donate, anything like that?
Yeah, www.forestryfirerp.org if you want to donate. Every dollar counts. My Instagram is royal.ramey. If you want to hit me up, chop it up, you know, I'm open for it. I'm not famous. A lot of people say, oh, you famous because you was on a Daily Show and all this stuff, which was cool. It was a cool experience. But yeah, I'm a regular guy just trying to help folks out and enjoy my life and be a good asset and a role model to folks. So and a mentor and all that. So.
We appreciate you joining us. It was a great conversation. So thanks for being here. And thanks to everybody joining us. I'm Tara Trask, your host on Last Mile Radio. Thanks.